When most people hear computer-aided design or CAD, they imagine engineers or architects with years of experience designing cars and skyscrapers. But apart from what you might have heard, it actually doesn't have to be complicated. The basics are actually quite simple, and once you get them down, you'll be able to model pretty much anything you want, which was why I partnered up with my friends over at Shapr3D to bring you this tutorial where we're going to design a media console from start to finish. I'm going to show you my workflow, the tools I use most often, and then in the end, we're going to make a cutting diagram that we can use to build this in real life. And just so you know, I'll be using my iPad for this tutorial, but the program is available on Mac and PC. All the core functions and workflow are going to be the same across all the platforms. So for today, if you just want to follow along and see if this program's right for you, you can download the free version using the link in my descriptions. And it's going to be able to handle everything I'm going to show you today because we are going to keep it pretty basic. But later, if you do decide that you want to invest in your future design career and unlock all the potential that this program has to offer, you can save 10% off by using my discount code BevelishCreations10. So with that said, let's go ahead and launch Shapr3D, and we're going to begin by clicking on Start Designing and then New Design. So this is going to be the 3D design space that we're going to be working in, but before we start modeling, let's familiarize ourselves with how to navigate. So if you're using an iPad like me, it's going to be super intuitive. We just pinch to zoom in and out, 2 fingers to pan, and 1 finger to orbit. So basically, if you use any touchscreen devices over the past 10 years, you've got it. But if you're using the computer, then zooming is done with the middle scroll wheel, panning is with the right mouse button, and then orbiting requires holding down the shift key on the keyboard while using the right mouse button. And on all platforms, we can also spin this little navigation cube in the top right hand corner to orbit around our model, or click on any of these faces or corners to go into any of the preset views. And then double tapping brings us back to an ISO view. And don't feel discouraged if you guys can't get these movements down immediately, because I'd say one of the most difficult things when starting with a new CAD program is just getting used to the navigation. And it's gonna take a little time, but eventually it's gonna be like muscle memory and you won't even have to think about it. So feel free to pause the video, practice a little bit, and when you're ready to move on, let's come up here to set our units. So I'm gonna use millimeters for this tutorial, but they do have imperial available as well, and we can use fractions or decimals. And another thing I like to do is to lock my grid size at 1 millimeter. That way, when I have any of these snapping functions turned on, my sketches will snap to small increments, even if I'm zoomed out much further. This is just a personal preference. I just wanted to show it to you guys in case that was something that you were looking to do as well. Okay, now we are ready to start modeling, and any CAD engineer is going to tell you that sketches are the foundation of a 3D model. Meaning that every 3D body is going to have to start with a sketch, and those sketches have to be placed on either a plane or a surface. So come over to the navigation cube and tap on this top face, and this will allow us to start sketching on this top plane. So come under Sketch and pick the rectangle tool, and we're going to start sketching from the origin and just drag across like that. And then we can use these text boxes to change our dimensions. So we'll change that to 500 by 2000, which is roughly about 20 inches by 79 inches. Now to extrude this, let's spin out of this top view, and you can see that there's a transparent blue surface within our sketch. This means our sketch is now fully closed. So we can pick that surface and pull up or down to extrude our body. And we're gonna pull that up 20 millimeters for the thickness of our panel. Okay, so usually with case builds, I like to use miter joints, especially if we're working with plywood. So to do that, we can either come under tools and use the chamfer tool, or we can just come in here and pick the top edge on both ends and push in. So the amount that we push in should be equal to the thickness of our part so that we're not changing the length of our part. So let's set that to 20 millimeters. There we go. Congratulations. We just made our bottom panel, and now we're ready to start building the rest of the case. And the good news is we can just use what we already have. So let's double tap to select this part and then select this copy function. Now if we use any of these arrows to move this part, it's going to move a duplicate of it. Let's set that to 350 millimeters for the total height of our case. And before we flip this over 180 degrees so that the mitered ends are oriented properly, we need to deselect this copy function, or else it's just going to create another copy of it. Okay, so one thing to note about this tool is if we go into a front view and let's bring that tool up, the center point is placed on the center point of our part. So even though we move the top panel up 350 millimeters, the actual distance from edge to edge is 370 millimeters. So we're gonna need to move that back down 20 millimeters. This is just something I want you guys to be aware of when using this tool, so you're not like, wait, I remember I set it to 350 millimeters. What changed? Am I crazy? Anyways, there are a few different ways to make the two side panels, and in my previous tutorial, I just went into a front view and made a sketch to fill in the space that's between the top and bottom panels, and then extruded it, which was pretty easy to do. But a different way to do this is double tap to select both parts, and if you're using a mouse, just hold down the shift key and select. Now we're gonna activate the copy function and spin this 90 degrees. Now let's come up here and pick the top edge on this left panel and then the mating edge on this top panel, and we're going to use the align tool and click done. Now let's do the same thing on this right side, align tool and done. So this is just a really quick way to snap two parts together about their midpoints. Now to change the height of these two, let's come down here and pick the chamfer surfaces. And don't use this arrow that pops up immediately because this is the offset face tool. And when we offset that face, this value in the text box is actually in the direction that's normal to this face that we just picked. And that's not what we want. So let's undo that. And let's pick these two faces again. This time we're going to use the move tool instead. So if we go into a front view, you can see that we're moving these two faces in this direction. That's what we want. And we can set that to 1650 because 2000 minus 1650 is equal to 350 millimeters. And that is the height of our case. So yeah, just remember to use the move tool when we need to change the overall length of a part that has angles on the ends. Okay, so we have our box. Now we're gonna cut a rabbet for our back panel. So let's spin to the back, and we're gonna double tap on this back face to start our sketch. And we can just draw a rectangle and then dimension it. But the way that I like to do this is actually pick the inside edges on all four of these panels and come down here to the offset edge tool and make sure that it's selected as single and not loop. Then we're gonna take this arrow and just drag it out 6 millimeters. Now let's spin out of that view, and we're gonna pick these faces that are created by that sketch. And push that in 6 millimeters to remove that material to finish up our rabbet for the back side. And we're actually gonna do the same thing and create a deeper rabbet on the front side as well. It was something I did on another media console that I built a while ago, and I just really love the way that looked. So we're gonna do the same thing here. Let's rotate to the front side and we're gonna start our sketch. So just like before, we're gonna pick the inside edges on all four panels and then use the offset edge tool to push this out 7 millimeters this time. And then let's come in here and pick these four surfaces. But this time we're gonna push them in 20 millimeters to finish up our rabbet. Okay, so this cabinet is pretty long. So we're gonna add 3 evenly spaced partitions in here to keep things from sagging. But before we do that, let's get our workspace organized. Come down here and open up our items manager, and we're gonna click on these eyeballs to hide our previous sketch planes, just to keep everything clean. Okay, now let's spin to the back and zoom in here so we can see this back profile clearly, and we're gonna start sketching on the shoulder of this rabbet. So let's double tap on that, and you'll know that this is the active surface because it's more saturated than the surfaces around it. And you should also see these purple points along the perimeter. And if you're not seeing these, just come down to the magnet tool and make sure that show guide points is selected. So basically these are the end and midpoints along the edges that are on the sketch plane, which is why we're not seeing any of these points along the outer perimeter of our parts. Okay, let's go back to our back view and make sure that the line tool is selected. And we're going to draw a vertical line from this top midpoint to the bottom midpoint. And pick this line and select this make construction function. Now our line is turned into a dashed line, meaning this is now going to be used as a reference geometry inside our sketch. And basically any shape can be turned into a reference geometry, not just lines. And these can be used as an axis for symmetry, defining size of odd shapes, for aligning sketching elements, or in our example, we're going to use this to set the position of our partitions. So now that we have this, let's go to our rectangle tool, and under this drop-down menu, change the type to center. And we're going to draw a center rectangle from this midpoint and just drag it down until it snaps to the bottom of our rabbet. And let's set that to 20 millimeters wide. Okay, so that's our center partition. Now to set the position for the other two, let's draw a horizontal line from this midpoint all the way to the inside surface on the side panel and change that to a construction line. And then we're going to draw another rectangle from this midpoint and set that to 20 millimeters. So if we take a measurement from this edge to this edge, we got 475. And then from this edge to this edge, we've got 475. So we can repeat the same process for the other partition, but I want to show you guys another method. So let's exit the sketch and then come down to transform and then to mirror. Now we're going to double tap on the sketch and then select this vertical center line as our axis of symmetry. And there we go. Okay, click done to finish. So using the mirror function to create that third partition is probably not faster or more efficient than if we just use construction lines. But I just want to show you guys the different options available to you so that you guys have more tools under your belt. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, let's measure the depth and see how far we need to extrude these. So one way to do this is to just pick this edge and get our measurement down here. But the better way is to use a measurements tool. And we're gonna click on this plus sign next to the point-to-point measurement, pick our points, and click done. So what's great about this is now this measurement is pinned, meaning that we can keep our work area nice and clean when we're designing, but whenever we need these measurements, we just activate the tool and there it is. And of course, we can have as many measurements on here as we want, which is great for when we're making our cutting diagrams later. I'd say this is probably one of my favorite new features that was added since I guess the last time I made a tutorial like this. And sorry guys, I digress. Sometimes I just kind of go off on a tangent when I make long videos like this. There is one more thing I want to talk about before we extrude these partitions. So if we spin to the back and select one of these rectangles, you can see that it's not selecting these sections that are intersecting with the top and bottom panels. So we have to actually come in here and select these separately. Or we can also just drag to select, and before we let go, pick faces. And now if we extrude this, you'll see that it's actually trying to cut dados into our top and bottom panels, which is not what we want. So what we want to do is come in here and pick this little icon. It's kind of hard to see, it's right next to the dimensions box. If we select that, you can see that it's defaulting to the subtract function, which is why it's cutting the dados. So we want to actually choose new body, and that's going to give us the entire panel. And instead of extruding that to 474, we're going to extrude that to 454. And alternatively, if you don't want to deal with that, we can come to our items manager and hide the top and bottom panels. And once again, just select the whole sketch, and before we let go, click on faces. And now if we extrude that, it's just going to give us a full panel. Once again, 454. Okay, let's bring back our top and bottom panels, and we're going to hide our sketch plane since we don't need it anymore. Now we need some dados in the top and bottom panels. So let's come under tools, and we're going to come down to subtract. And we're going to pick the top, bottom, and our three partitions. So if you look up here, it's going to tell you what these signs mean. And to be honest, I think it's worded a little bit awkward, but basically what it's saying is that the plus signs are the bodies that we want to remove material from, and the minus signs are the bodies that we're going to use to do the removing. So for us, we want to remove material from the top and bottom panels using our partitions. So the top and bottom panels need to have plus signs. Let's change that and click done. If we go and hide our partitions, you're able to see all our dados. And there we go, we've got our case, but before we start building the doors and drawers and all that good stuff, this is a great time to get organized. So let's bring back our partitions. And we're gonna select everything. Oh, so one thing about this selection tool is if we're dragging to the right, it's only gonna select the features that are fully inside this box, which is why it only selected these lines. But if we drag to the left, it'll select any feature that this box touches. And if we click on bodies, it'll select the entire body that those features are contained in. And I think this tool is a little over-engineered for our purposes. So usually what I do is just zoom out and then drag a box across the whole thing like that. It's just a lot easier, and we don't have to worry about which direction we're dragging in. Okay, so once all these parts are selected, come down here and click on this little folder icon with a plus sign, and that moves everything into that folder. We can then go and rename that folder case. We can also come in here and rename these parts individually, but we don't really have that many parts, so I usually just leave it the way it is. But as for the sketches, I usually don't move those because Shapr3D organizes sketches based on the planes that they're drawn on. So if we have different sketches but they're drawn on the same plane, they're going to be grouped together. For example, our very first sketch was for this bottom panel, which we drew on the bottom plane, and it's oh, you know what? I think we moved it into this folder because it wasn't hidden when we moved everything. Okay, so here it is, and let's hide our case. This was our very first rectangle. And let's hide that sketch and bring back our case. And now let's say we want to start designing our legs. We're obviously going to go to the bottom and we're going to double tap on the surface to start our sketch. And the moment we start sketching, our rectangle shows back up. If we hide the case, there it is. So in my mind, I'm starting a new sketch, right? But the program's like, no, it's the same sketch because it's on the same plane. And you might think, oh man, this is kind of messy, and I totally agree with you. But one thing to keep in mind is that Shapr3D is a direct modeling program, meaning that once the 3D parts are extruded, it's no longer connected with the 2D sketches, and any changes we want to make to those 3D parts can be made on the bodies themselves. So usually, once I'm done with a portion of my design, I just go in and delete my sketches. But let's say that we really want to keep this sketch, and this is the most amazing rectangle we've ever seen. It's a piece of art, and we don't want any other sketches to ruin it. What we can do is let's exit the sketch, and we're going to select this sketch plane from the items manager, and let's spin it out of that view, and we're going to move it down. And we're moving it down because that's the direction that's normal to our plane. If we move it left or right or front to back, it's not really going to change anything because it's still on that plane. Okay, and we can move it down as much as we want. So let's just do 0.1 millimeter. And let's bring back our case. And let's hide that sketch. Now let's say we want to sketch our leg. Let's double tap on that bottom face and let's say we make a shape. And there you go. You can see that I just created a new sketch plane. So hopefully one day we're going to get an update with a better way to organize our sketches. But for now, if you really need to save your masterpiece, this is the way to do it. Okay, let's undo that and exit our sketch. Let's close that and then let's spin to the front side. Wait. I kind of got lost there for a sec. Double tap on this so we can reorient ourselves. Okay, we're gonna put 3 drawers in this right cubby here. So let's zoom in here and we're gonna put a sketch plane on this shoulder of the front rabbit. Go to our rectangle tool and we're just gonna draw a random rectangle inside this empty space. Make sure that it's not snapping to any of the edges or points. Select this top edge and then the top edge of our opening, and we're gonna set that to 2 millimeters. And we're going to repeat the same thing on this right side and this bottom side. Okay, for this left side, we're just going to move it until it matches the edge on our partition. Somewhere like that. Okay, let's zoom out, and this is going to be the area that our 3 drawer fronts are going to occupy. And the total height of this is 306 millimeters. So divide that by 3, we get 102. Let's go back to our sketch. And we're going to pick this top edge and then use the offset edge tool to move this edge down 101. Now pick the bottom edge, move it up 101. Pick this edge, move it down 2 millimeters. Pick this edge and move it up 2 millimeters. Now let's spin out of this view, pick these 3 faces, push them in 20 millimeters. Oh, it's already at 20. Okay. Let's go back to the items manager, pick these 3, and put them into a new folder. And we're going to rename that drawers. All right, there we go. Before you have a comment down there saying that the middle drawer front is a millimeter smaller than the other 2, this is just a quick and dirty way to do this. It's not perfect, but then again, if I'm building this in real life, my lumber is not going to be perfect, and I'll be using referential measurements to deal with all the tolerances. But what this will do is give me a good idea on how much material we're going to need for this build, and that is much more important. Also, in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip making the drawer boxes because it's basically just a rehash of everything we've already done up to this point. But if you are interested to see how to model box joints or dovetails, I do have a separate video covering this, so be sure to Check that out. Okay, we're gonna start making the doors. And don't worry guys, I'm not just gonna sketch 2 rectangles and extrude it and call it a day. I actually wanna show you guys some other tools we can use. So let's take a measurement from this bottom left corner here. Let's just tap that line. Oh, wait. We need to hide that sketch plane, tap that line, and then measure to the edge of this partition. And we want the X component. So look down here and it says the X component is 997. We're just gonna round that up to 1,000 just to make it easy. Okay, let's double tap on this front face to start our sketch plane. And we're gonna draw a diagonal rectangle from this lower left corner. And we're gonna set that to 500 because that's half of 1,000. And we're gonna set the height to, yeah, 25 is good. And we're gonna extrude that surface inboard 18 millimeters. Let's hide that real quick. And now double tap to select it, and we're gonna move a copy of it to the top of our case. So right there. So I know you're probably thinking, what are we doing with this? Well, I'm thinking that instead of using solid doors, we're gonna build doors with vertical slats. And I was kind of inspired by all those slatted walls that I've been seeing all over social media, and I just thought that that would look really cool on our media console. So basically the 2 parts we just made are gonna be the horizontal rails that are gonna hold the vertical pieces together. But before we make those, let's hide everything that we don't need, just so we can see what we're doing. And we're gonna start a sketch plane on this face here. Let's draw a line that connects the back edges of these 2 parts. And then we're gonna come to the opposite corner and we're gonna draw a line up. Let's do 13 millimeters, so about half an inch. And then we'll go left 10 millimeters. Let's do the same thing on the bottom side. So come down 13 millimeters and then left 10. And we're going to finish this sketch by connecting these endpoints like that. Now let's pick this face and we're going to extrude that 10 millimeters. There we go. So that's one of our well, actually it looks, let's add a chamfer on the ends here. It looks kind of weird, just flat like that. Let's pick this edge and this edge and we're going to push it in 4 millimeters. That way we still have 6 millimeters on this flat end. And don't worry guys, we're not going to keep this at 45 degrees because I think it looks kind of weird. It looks worse than the 90 degrees. We can actually change the angle of this chamfer, and we can do that by picking the chamfer surface and then the edge. And this edge becomes the axis that this chamfer surface can rotate about. Let's go to a right view so we can see how much we need to rotate this. I want this corner here to be lower than this corner. I think that would look pretty good. So let's, yeah, right there, 40 degrees. Let's do the same thing on this bottom side. So pick the chamfer surface, pick the edge that we want to rotate that about, and do 40 degrees. So basically we just added 40 degrees on top of the original 45 degrees, giving us a total of 85 degrees. It's been a long day, guys. Anyway, we got our first piece. Now I'm going to show you how we can evenly space this out across the rest of the door. So let's double tap to select it and then come over here and pick the pattern tool. Make sure the type is set to linear, and then under this drop down menu, make sure that we're using total distance because we know the total width of our door is 500 millimeters. Okay, we're going to set the quantity at 3 for now, and we're just going to drag this across to 490. And the reason for this is because this value is once again taken from the midpoint of this part. So basically it's subtracting the half the thickness or 5 millimeters from each of these parts on the ends. Okay, so let's change this quantity to 15 and see how that looks. The gap's too big. Let's do 25. This is probably good. Let's do 23. Yeah, I like this. All right, so let's click done. And if I'm building this in real life, what I'll probably end up doing is cut some evenly spaced dados or fingers or whatever you want to call it into these horizontal rails. And that's gonna help me keep these vertical pieces aligned. And it's gonna make the glue up a lot easier and stronger joint too. You know what, let's add that. So we're gonna come in here and pick the front faces on both the top and bottom rails, and we're gonna increase the thickness by 3 millimeters. That gives our total thickness to 21 millimeters. All right, so now both of these are blowing through the vertical parts, but don't worry, let's come under tools and use the subtract tool. And we're gonna pick the top and bottom rails first and make sure that both have a plus sign, because remember, plus signs mean that these are the parts that we want to remove materials from. All right, let's go to a front view just to make this next part easier. We're gonna drag a selection box from right to left to select all of these vertical parts. And we're gonna click done. So now if we move the rails back, you can see that the grooves are cut. All right, let's undo to move that back, and we're gonna go to our items manager and we're gonna pick all 4 parts. And we're gonna put them into a new folder that we're gonna rename to, what's up with this small keyboard? What the hell? Okay, let's rename that to doors. Okay, let's go into this folder. We're gonna pick all 4 again and put them into another folder, and we're gonna rename that left. All right, let's select that folder and activate the copy function, and we're gonna move a copy of that 500 millimeters to the right. And we're gonna rename that right for our second door. All right, so there are our 2 doors. Let's bring back everything else to see how things look. All right, the case and the drawers. Guys, this looks awesome. Okay, so the idea behind this case is that there's always going to be at least one cubby that's completely open. And we can move these doors to cover different sections of the case, either together like this, or individually. And each of these different configurations kind of gives this case a different look. It was just something I thought might look interesting, but this model proves it. Okay, I take back what I said earlier about if I'm gonna build this in real life. I am definitely gonna be building this in real life. So if you're interested to see that video, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell so you'll be notified when that video goes live. But anyway, let's throw some legs on here. Let's undo to move our door back, and we're gonna flip to the bottom side, and we're gonna start drawing a diagonal rectangle from this bottom front corner. And we'll set that to 40 by 40. And let's exit that sketch. Okay, this sketch was put in the doors folder because that was the active folder when we start sketching. So let's hold that down and we'll move that back out to the root folder. Let's pick that sketch plane, and we're gonna use the move tool to move a copy down 30 millimeters. And then before deselecting that copy function, we'll move another copy down 150 millimeters. Just so you know, this 150 is still measured from our original sketch, not from our first copy, because we didn't deselect that copy function. Okay, let's deselect everything, and we're gonna come to this bottom sketch, double tap on it, and change the dimension to 25 by 25, and make sure that this corner didn't move. And we're gonna exit the sketch. Okay, let's go ahead and hide all the bodies so we can see what is going on. Now let's go under Tools and select Loft. And we're gonna pick this bottom face and then the middle face, and this creates a transition body between those two. Click Done. Now pick this top face on this body and change to the Extrude tool. And we're gonna extrude that up 30 millimeters. And there's our leg. Okay, so just so you guys know, loft is usually used for creating smooth transitions between surfaces. So if we went in here and picked all 3 surfaces in one loft operation, it's actually gonna create this curved body on this bottom half. Now, there are other ways to create this shape that we wanted, but I think the method I showed you is probably gonna be the quickest. Okay, anyway, let's bring back our case. And then we're gonna delete these sketches because we don't really need them anymore and they're just gonna get in the way. Okay, now let's select this leg and we're gonna move a copy of it to the opposite corner. Deselect copy and we're gonna spin this 90 degrees. All right, now let's go to a bottom view and we're gonna select both of these legs and we're gonna move a duplicate to the opposite corner. Deselect copy and spin those 180 degrees. All right, let's close this. So if you look at it from a bottom view, it should look like the little squares on the legs are flush to the corners of the case. So if that's what it looks like, you got it. But if not, just make some adjustments until it looks like this. All right, now we are ready to move on to making the stretchers. And instead of making a sketch, we can just pick this surface on the leg and select Extrude and extrude that surface to match the opposite end. Now, before we click away though, notice how there's no line between the stretcher and the leg. And that means this is currently a single part. So click on this little button here next to the dimensions text box and change that from union to new body. And that's gonna separate our stretcher. Now, double tap on the stretcher and we are gonna move a copy of this to the opposite side. And then let's spin another copy 90 degrees. All right, now let's tap on this top edge on the stretcher and then the mating edge on the leg. And then we're gonna use the align tool to snap the two together. Okay, now we can just pick this face and pull it until it matches the opposite leg, but I wanna show you guys a different tool. So come under tools, and then select the replace face tool. There it is. Pick this face and then pick the face on the leg, and that's gonna automatically extend our stretcher to match that leg. I know you're probably like, okay, is that really more efficient than just extruding this part? Like, oh, what's the big deal? Well, I know in our example it doesn't look like much, but this tool actually does more than just extending a part. So let's say that we have a circular leg that our stretcher needs to mate to. Now when we use this replace face tool, the stretcher is not only going to extend to that part, it also matches the face of that cylinder. So it's actually a few different tools mixed in one. Pretty cool, right? Okay, now let's finish this up, and we're gonna move a copy of this to the back. And let's go to the items manager, pick everything, and we're gonna put them into a new folder. Now we're gonna rename that folder to, hey, my keyboard's back. All right, let's rename that to legs. Sorry, that was a little overly enthusiastic. Okay, we're not done yet because I want to cut a profile around the legs to create a little separation between the top and bottom. So let's hide our case, and we're gonna sketch on this top surface. Let's go to a diagonal rectangle, and we're just gonna drag one from this corner to this corner. Let's hide our legs and go down to offset edge tool and make sure that loop is selected. That way when we pick one line, it's going to select the entire thing. And we're going to offset that 5 millimeters. Okay, let's bring back our legs, and now we're going to pick these surfaces. And we have to pick these individually because, like I said earlier, these lines on these parts are laying on the sketch plane. So Shapr3D is seeing these lines as part of our sketch, which is why it's dividing these surfaces the way it is. Which is also why we had to hide the legs when we used the offset edge tool. It just made it easier for us to select those lines. But where's my arrow? Oh, there it is. So yeah, once these are all selected, we're gonna push this down 5 millimeters to create that profile. Let's bring everything else back and see how it looks. Wow, this looks so good. There's so much depth. It's not just like a flat face, and we got these slatted doors that adds more to it, and the separation between the legs and the top. It just looks so good. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here or anything, but guys, come on. Toot toot. Oh, you know what? In all this excitement, I totally forgot about our shelves. Let's start sketching on the back face of this partition. And oh, you know what? I kind of want to try something. So let's go to the rectangle tool, and what if we start on the surface on this partition? We're just going to drag it all the way across to the inside surface on this side panel here. Let's set that to 20 millimeters. So Shapr3D should be splitting this rectangle with these lines on our partitions. So we should be able to, we should be able to just pick these separately, just like that. And let's extrude that 450. Yeah, easy peasy. All right, now let's sketch the back panel on this back surface here. Once again, rectangle, and drag it from one corner to the other, like that. And we're gonna offset that, 6 millimeters forward. There we go, guys. Toot toot. I'm sorry, I'm just so excited with the way this looks. And like I said, I need a media console, so we're definitely building this. And the next obvious step is to make a cutting diagram to see how much material we're gonna need for this build. And the first thing we're gonna do is go to the items manager, and we're gonna select all the bodies, including the ones that are in folders. And we're gonna throw them all into a new folder. And we're gonna rename that folder model. All right, while we're here, we're gonna come and delete all the sketches too, because we really don't need them anymore. All right, now select this model folder, and we're gonna move a copy of it to the right. And we're gonna rename this new one, materials. Okay, let's hide the model folder, and we're gonna go into the materials folder. That way, everything we do from this point on is going to be inside this folder. We'll go into a top view, and let's close that and go to a sketch. And we're gonna make a sketch of a rectangle that is 2400 by 1200. And extrude that up 20 millimeters. So this represents a sheet of 4x8 sheet of plywood. And now we're gonna start moving these parts onto this plywood. And we can use the align function for this, but I want to show you how to use the translate tool. So come under transform and select translate. The first thing we're going to do is double tap to select this part, click next, and then pick the starting point on that part, and then pick an end point and click done. So the difference here is that the align tool will always snap two parts together using their midpoints as reference, whether that midpoint is on a line or on a surface, and then we'll have to drag it around to place it where we need it to be. And the translate tool, on the other hand, will allow us to choose our starting and end points right at the beginning. I'd say 99% of the time, both tools will get you to where you need to be. One just might be quicker than the other depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so now let's use the align function to nest the rest of our parts. And what's great about this tool is that the part we're trying to move doesn't need to be oriented exactly before we try to use this tool. So for this example, our part's not laying flat on this sheet of plywood, right? But once we use the align tool, it's gonna lay it down flat for us, which is why this tool is so great for this application. All right, since the top and bottom panels and side panels are exactly the same, we're just gonna move a copy of that down instead of moving it from our model. And this sheet's pretty much filled up, so we're gonna double tap and move a copy of that down for our other parts. And let's start moving our partitions. So one thing I get asked often is why I don't add curves when I make these cutting diagrams. And I guess the reason is pretty simple. I never really crowd these parts on all four edges of the panel. So for example, this top section, it's pressed against this side and then against this side, but we have so much material left on this bottom and right side. If I take a measurement here from this edge to this edge, we have 50 millimeters, which is nearly 2 inches, right? And on top of that, our sheet of plywood was set to 2400 millimeters long, which is actually close to 95 inches. So on top of those 2 inches, we have an additional 1 inch. Yeah, so this is the reason why I never really worried about running out of materials when I make these cutting diagrams. I don't know, maybe there's another reason why I should add curves to these. And if there is, let me know in the comments. Maybe I overlooked something. But yeah, this is pretty much how I make my cutting diagrams for plywood. I know everyone's different, but I prefer doing this manually versus using some automatic plugins. Even when I was using other programs, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, I still did it this way because I just like being able to lay this out as most efficient for my workflow. And I'm not talking about material efficiency, but rather how to make these cuts using the least amount of adjustments at my table saw or with my track saw. Okay, anyway, I know we still need to lay things out for our drawer boxes and back panels, but the process is pretty much the same, so in the interest of time, we're just gonna skip it. As for hardwood, let's go back to a top view, and we're gonna sketch a rectangle that is 150 millimeters wide by 2400 long. And that's about 6 inches wide by 8 feet long, and that's a pretty common size that I can find over at my lumber stores. Okay, now we're gonna start grouping together parts that have similar thicknesses. So the first group is gonna be 50 millimeter thick parts. So that's about 2 inches, and that's going to be our leg parts. So let's highlight those three, and we're gonna move them over. Now pick this bottom edge and then this edge on our lumber, and we're going to use the align function to place it. Click done. All right, let's double click on that and move a copy of it for our second long piece. Let's do the same thing for this short piece. Let's pick that edge and then this edge on our long piece. Use the align function to place it. Click done. Let's move a copy of it. All right, so to move the foot, we can also use the faces to align them. So pick that face and use the align function and click done. Yeah, you can see that it's blowing through, but it's all right. We're just concerned with the total length right now. All right, let's double click on that and we're gonna move a copy of it and move another copy and move another copy. Okay, there we go. So this is the lumber we need for our leg pieces. Now let's double click on this and move another copy over. And we're going to change this thickness to 20 millimeters. And this is going to be for our drawer front and these rails. So we're going to move these three over. And let's rotate that real quick. We're going to use the align function to place that on here. All right, now let's quickly make 3 copies of this. And then similarly, let's move this guy. Pick this edge, and then this edge. Use the align function again, click done. We'll create 3 more copies. And 1 more. All right, we have some leftover material here that we can use to make these. So pick that edge, this edge, and align. Okay. Now let's make some copies of this real quick. Okay, let's create a copy of this so we can make the rest of our vertical rails, and let's see how many we can get on there. All right, that is a total of 36, and we need a total of 46, so we need 10 more. Let's make another copy of this. Oh, I guess I could have just selected all of this along with that board and made that copy, but oh well. And there we go. All right, so we know we need 1 piece of 8-quarter lumber and 3 pieces of 4-quarter lumber, and it's good that we have a bunch of material left over because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna mess this up. All right, yeah, I think we're finally done. Obviously, there are some details that we need to work out in order for us to build this, but I think we're gonna do that in another video. I know I cover a lot of information in this video, but don't be discouraged if you don't get it the first time. Just go back, slow things down, and practice. Now, one of the best things about this app is that whenever you activate any of these tools, there's gonna be a little tutorial that pops up at the top to show you what it does and how to use it. And if that's not enough, there are tutorials inside the app that will help guide you through different projects, and also a Facebook group with a lot of knowledgeable people that are always happy to help. And I've asked my fair share of questions on there. All right, if you guys found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell so you'll be notified when I make more tutorials like this. And also, of course, when I build this media console. All right, have a good day, guys, and I will see you in the next one.